campus program, but they have their offices there, and they are one of the premier, I guess you'd call them a free market think tank. They actually have seminars and classes in the theory of Ludwig von Mises, of the Austrian School of Monetary Policy, and I'll tell you what, it is some of the most clear-headed thought on economics that you'll ever find. You know, when you're watching it's always, interesting to watch the Federal Reserve chairman when they go before the congressional committees and they talk about monetary policy in this country, and you kind of watch and you go, something doesn't sound right here half the time, and it's because we've gotten so far away from many of the principles that this nation was founded upon. One of which that we were not supposed to have any sort of central bank. So maybe that's one of the first big problems right there. But joining us this morning to talk about tax policy and taxes is Dr. Mark Thornton. Mark, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's great to be with you here on a day where at least a few of your listeners can start celebrating their Tax Freedom Day. Yeah,
but not here in California. Tax-free. We are number 7 from the bottom, or number 43 from the top, as far as tax freedom goes. I think ours doesn't come till late in May.
Well, I was just referring to the federal tax, and I did say just a few of your listeners because the official Tax Freedom Day this year is on April 30th, and that just represents an average of the whole nation with respect to their federal taxes.
Right.
And of course, that's grown from over the last couple decades from April 1st all the way to April 30th, and then next year it's going to go into May.
Right.
And of course, if you go back 200 years, we started celebrating our Tax Freedom Day sometime in the second week of January, so we've gotten a little bit out of control with respect to taxes.
Yeah, and here in California, it's not till like the middle of May.
Everything comes a little later in California.
Yeah, it does. That's right. But now down where you are in Alabama, you guys are like right near the top. You're like April 12th or 13th. It already passed.
Right,
so,
and we're also number 1 in property taxes in the country. We have the lowest property taxes in the nation.
I'm going to Alabama with a banjo on my knee. So, I'm going to talk with Dan Mitchell about something here next hour, about an hour from now. But you might just want to comment on this for a second, amplify it. But there was a study that came out the other day that shows that over 1 in 2 Americans now receive significant income from governmental programs. And so when we're talking about trying to reduce the tax burden in this country and reduce the size of government, it's going to be very difficult because what politicians have done is they have created an incredible interest base.
Yes, everybody is feeding at the trough, you know. And, of course, the famous French economist Frédéric Bastiat said the state is the great fiction in which everybody tries to live at the expense of everybody else. And that's what we've become. We've become that crazed system where we all expect to benefit more than we pay in taxes. And, of course, that's actually impossible. We're just draining our system of its economic vitality at an incredible rate. I mean, the growth in government has been out of control over the last couple of administrations. When Clinton first came into office, the federal government was only spending less than $1.4 trillion. Now it's spending it close to $2.5 trillion.
Wow. And by the way, I saw a figure that mentioned yesterday that personal income tax paid by all Americans will come over just a little over $1 trillion. So where does the government come up with that other $1.5 trillion?
Well, it's got its fingers into everything, Mark.
Okay.
It's got Social Security tax, Medicare, Medicaid, inheritance, estate taxes, excise taxes, tariffs, all sorts of fees. The number of actual revenue sources probably exceeds 100 in total, but the big ones are the income tax, the corporate income tax, the Social Security taxes.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, too. When you start talking about taxes and who pays the taxes, how much, what kind of percentage of the total tax bill are corporations paying compared to individual persons here in the country?
Well, corporations really don't pay.
I know they pass the tax, so, they pass it on in the form of raised prices, but, they have to write a check, okay? And this is the thing that people, a lot of times the friends of fraud on the left will tell everyone that, well, they're not paying their fair share. And like if the individual taxpayer is holding up all the burden, and particularly the poor, holding up the burden of running government. And that really isn't the case at all, but it's one that they make in, the typical class envy and class wars that they try to stoke.
Absolutely. I mean, as you say, corporations really don't pay taxes. Their customers pay taxes. And, so we raise, somewhere in the vicinity of 10% through the corporations. But, they spend a lot of money avoiding these taxes, just like you and I do.
Right.
We have our computer programs, we have our accountants, we have, tax strategies that we invoke. We buy homes in order to reduce our tax burden. Well, corporations do the same thing. They waste money trying to avoid taxes. So it's not just the taxes, which are, is a form of slavery of the American people, but it's also the tremendous inefficiencies that it introduces into our economy, and it also discourages anything that the tax is placed on. So if you place a tax on labor, you get less labor. If you take a tax on business, you get fewer businesses.
So is that, in a sense, when corporations and businesses pay a lot of money to figure out where the loopholes are and to avoid those taxes, is that effort, that money spent, is that in a sense a deadweight loss to the economy?
Absolutely. It's absolutely a deadweight loss, and it's a tremendous burden on our economy because we are an innovation technological leader, and yet many of our brightest people are tax attorneys and accountants. These are really smart, hardworking people, and we've got them tied up in a prison called the tax system. They're still making money, but it's all wasted effort. And if we could release those people, these are really smart, really hardworking people, if we release them from that type of job and we put them into managing businesses, technology, innovation, we would be a much, much stronger economy.
Now, a lot of the people, the friends of fraud, as I refer to them, would try to convince the American people that we can continue raising the tax burden, and it's not really going to affect our economy because, after all, they like to point to the social welfare states of Europe as the model, quote-unquote, democracy, where people live in a paternalistic, cradle-to-grave society, and, you see, their economies are doing okay. Well, are they?
Well, they're doing okay, but that's not very good. I mean, there was a study done last year comparing Sweden and how much the average Swede had to spend on goods and services, and it came to roughly the same amount as the people of Mississippi, the poorest state in the nation, much poorer, in fact, than the state of Alabama, which is down the list. And so, if we want to reduce our standard of living to below that of Mississippi, then yes, we can, raise our tax burden from, 25 to 30% on up to 40% or 50%, but it's going to be impoverishment of the people, basically, and restriction on all your liberties as well.
Yeah, and what happens to unemployment when you go into this type of spending? Because isn't the norm over in Europe around 10%?
Yeah, it's over 10%, and of course, that is reduced. That's not a good reflection of the actual unemployment because, of course, so many people are tied up into dead-end government jobs and misplaced public works projects. If you looked at the real unemployment rate, it would be much, much higher. We'd be talking about something along the lines of 20%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that. And the thing is that in the European economies, they've accepted an unemployment rate, nominal unemployment rate that they publish between 9 and 11%. To them, that's an acceptable figure. And, in this country, it would be completely unacceptable. When we have unemployment around 4.5–5%, a lot of people don't like that.
Right.
And, that's traditionally where, when we have around a 4% rate, for some reason the government calls it full employment. The government likes to claim a lot of things that aren't so, but go ahead.
Mark, a 10% unemployment rate is an economic depression, basically. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. I mean, the unemployment rate was higher during our Great Depression.
Yeah, about 28%.
Yeah, but a 10% level is a depression. If you go from 6 to 10%, then you're in a recession, basically. But 10% and above, that's economic depression.
Yeah, and see, that's what they've ended up with there, and only because, the governments print a lot of fiat money, they take, now in the case of France, I was talking to someone from France on another subject, and we got onto their tax system, and he mentioned to me that 70% of your income in France, of your reported income, is taken in taxes to run that cradle-to-grave society. And one of the things that this fellow indicated to me was, there's a tremendous black market for everything in France. Especially for, goods, particularly labor services. No one wants to be paid. Everybody wants to be paid under the table. No one wants it on the books because it's the only way that people can get by. Because when government is taking 70 cents of every dollar you own, it doesn't leave you a heck of a lot, for yourself. So now what the government does is they encourage people to break the law and not report their income because it's the only way that they can make ends meet is by doing jobs on the side and taking the cash under the table.
Oh, absolutely. I was over in Europe last year, and I learned of this firsthand, and all the intimate details of how people are basically breaking the law. Once you get a system to this craziness, the European welfare system, you think, oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that neat? Isn't that so quaint? But actually what you've created is a society of lawbreakers where everybody, virtually everyone, is breaking the law, including public officials.
Yeah.
And so it's the backwards of what people in America think, oh, wouldn't that be great? Isn't that pristine? It's actually a society of systemic law-breaking and corruption.
It leads to tremendous moral decay among the body politic because then, there's no respect for rule of law. Everyone sees the actual law of the country as being unjust, and so you lose you lose respect for rule of law completely in societies like that. And we're heading down that path in this country if we continue with our onerous tax system. Mark, I need to take a quick break here. Can you hang on for just a second?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mark Thornton's our guest. He's with the Mises Institute. We'll be right back.
Raindrops keep falling on my head.
When's the last time you replaced your wiper blades? Get ready in advance. Right now, wiper blades are 25% off.
I'm never gonna stop the rain by complaining because I'm free.
And as always, Advance Auto Parts will install them fast and free. Yeah, free. We're ready in advance.
Sale ends April 28th.
Traffic is brought to you by Granite Construction. You have a job to be done, right? For professional and friendly service, call 1-800-GRANITE. What can Granite build for you? Go with the best. Granite Construction.
And taking a look at our traffic and weather around the Monterey Bay Area, we have a non-injury accident, Dunbarton Road, and this will be at San Juan Road. This is in North Monterey County. Then we also have some debris in the roadway, southbound Highway 1 just south of 129. That's the Riverside Drive in Santa Cruz County. In San Benito County, we have an ambulance responding to an injury accident, Fairview Road at McCloskey Road, and then southbound 101, a traffic hazard in the Prunedale area. And let's see, one other thing to mention to you, the weather for the Monterey Bay Area today, it's going to be okay, not as nice as I was just talking with Mark about the weather down there in Auburn, Alabama, which is beautiful, but it'll be okay here today. Windy and cooler, and a high of 63 degrees today for the Salinas area, so it's okay. 6:27 as we continue our conversation with Dr. Mark Thornton from the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. By the way, Alabama, the home state of one of my favorite character actors, a guy by the name of Pat Buttram. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
Mr. Haney from Green Acres.
Oh, yeah.
And Gene Autry's sidekick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Alabama is a state of characters. I mean, they're just wonderful people across the board. There's a lot of very talented people who come out of the state of Alabama.
You had a Democratic senator, the U.S. Senate there for many years, who talked. He became, I think he was the chair of some judiciary committee back.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Senator Hal Heflin.
Yeah, Howell Heflin. And, I used to see him on television. I'd never seen that guy before. I'd see him on TV, and there he had this slick, his hair was parted down the middle and slicked over to the sides. He looked like one of these old politicians from the 30s, and he talked like Foghorn Leghorn.
That's right.
That cartoon character, and he was absolutely the caricature of the senator from the South.
Absolutely. He was a character. I had a pleasure of meeting him, and there's many stories about him.
I didn't like his
feet on the air.
I didn't like a lot of his Democratic policies, but he was a great character. He's probably a fun guy to sit down and have a beer with.
I think so.
So, we were talking about the fact that the problem with onerous tax policy is it leads to moral decay. And, we saw this a couple of years ago when they had that terrible, terrible summer heat wave in France. And many, many people, older people, died in their homes because their government-provided air conditioning systems weren't working. Family members didn't check on older family members because in a society like that, people have abdicated their responsibility to their immediate family members because, after all, we live in a paternalistic society where the government is responsible. And it's that kind of thing where everyone's responsible, no one's responsible.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's this mysterious belief that people have in their government that they're going to take care of people, but that's just not really the case. I mean, if you want to depend on somebody, you want to depend on their profit motive to get out there and fix your air conditioning. And I know in Auburn, Alabama, where the temperatures are in the high 90s and the humidity is over 100%, and your air conditioner breaks down on a Saturday before a party, you can count on the fact that an air conditioner repairman will come out on the weekend to fix your unit because he's based on the profit motive.
Right. And however, if you're depending on the government to do it for you, well, let's take this as an example. When you have a burned-out light bulb in the street lamp on your street, and you call the City Public Works Department and say, that lamp is out, can you send someone over to change it? How long does it take for the bucket truck to get there and for them to replace the lamp? I don't know about Auburn, Alabama, but I know that in Marina, California, it takes 3 months.
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, one of the problems of living in Auburn, Alabama is we have these ice storms and we've had, hurricanes, and the power gets knocked out. And, very often, the public utility will take up to a week to fix the power. I've been on without power for a week. And
wow.
Nothing like that would ever happen with privately provided services.
There's always, because, and this is the thing, in every type of private service, there's accountability. Because there's always the opportunity for the customer who's not satisfied to go somewhere else. And anytime you deal with a monopoly, there is never the impetus to serve the customer and make sure that the customer is happy because they can't go anywhere else. And this is the basic problem in the nature of government-provided services is that government is a monopoly, and therefore government has no reason to be accountable to its customers, the taxpayers. I may not like Bank of America, Mark. Okay, and if I feel like I'm getting screwed around by Bank of America, I can walk across the parking lot to Washington Mutual. If I don't like Washington Mutual, I can go to Community Bank, or I can go to Rabobank, or I can go to Pacific Valley Bank. There's a lot of different places I can go in that instance and they'll find someone that'll treat me better. But when I've got a problem with getting a street lamp, I can't call anybody else to change that. That belongs to the government. It's their job. And so what we end up with is dealing, we're always told by people in government that monopolies are bad, and yet these are the people with the biggest monopoly of all.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's what taxation feeds. It feeds into the system. The more we get taxed, the more government controls various aspects of our lives, whether it's, the public utility, whether it's the post office, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, where they're determining your health care rather than yourself, and they're in a position of being a monopolist, and monopolists always reduce the quality and quantity of their service to their customers. And, with government, it's just one long waiting line, no matter what it is. I mean, if you go into a government bureaucracy, you're going to stand there in line. So it's not just the street lights, it's everything across the board, basically. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I've run out of time here, but I want to thank you for joining us this morning on KION, and appreciate you joining us. And by the way, the website for the Mises Institute, if any of our listeners want to go online and read about the Mises Institute and some of the works of Ludwig von Mises.
It's www.mises.org. It's the world's largest economics webpage. Everything is available there for free, downloadable, and we encourage you to visit the webpage. It's actually a wonderful resource. You can search for any term in the world, and you'll come up with something interesting.
All right, Mark, thank you so much for joining us.